Today's Future Driven Forum is brought to you by Harman International, a Samsung company. On behalf of the Alliance for Automotive Innovation and our member companies, welcome to this edition of Autos 2050's Future Driven Forum, our ongoing digital discussion series. Today's forum is The Road Ahead, Modernizing Our Approach to Advancing Vehicle Safety Technologies. Please welcome our host, the Alliance for Automotive Innovation President and CEO, John Bozzella.
Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us. Today's session is going to cover topics that have been in the news and have been the subject of ongoing discussions among safety regulators, federal policymakers, and the public. Auto Innovators and our members have been at the forefront of efforts to further improve motor vehicle safety and speed the deployment of advanced driving assistance technologies. Our member companies recently released important principles for driver state monitoring, which are guidelines that we believe provide an important platform to discuss the benefits and limitations of partially automated systems. We've also proposed revising and modernizing the new car assessment program to include crash avoidance systems. Both of these topics were raised at a recent U.S. Senate hearing at which I testified. And members of both the House and the Senate are drafting relevant legislation to further improve roadway safety when it comes to helping to reduce crashes and fatalities on our nation's roadways. While these advanced safety technologies can eventually lead to highly automated or self-driving vehicles, they have immense value in and of themselves today. Right now, automatic emergency braking and lane change warnings are in an increasing number of vehicles and saving lives. Additional advancements, such as detection and automatic braking for pedestrians, can improve public safety both inside and outside of vehicles. As cars become more automated, they will expand mobility for the elderly and those with disabilities. As an industry, one of our tasks is to increase consumer and public acceptance of these life-saving technologies, helping drivers understand what these technologies do. That's the only way we'll be able to realize these safety benefits as quickly as possible. And we're also talking about creating jobs. Our global competitors, particularly China, are moving rapidly to gain dominance in these emerging advanced technologies. After all, the nations that lead the development and adoption of innovative technologies, such as connectivity and automation, will also shape supply chains, define global standards, and potentially reshape the international marketplace. Today's panelists are certainly qualified to share their expertise on these and other issues. Robert Kemp is Vice President of Strategy, Portfolio, and Business Development for Advanced Driver Assistance Systems and Automated Driving at Harman, a Samsung company. He has 2 decades of experience in leadership roles in the field of mobile technology, cloud solutions, and automotive, with a special focus on the identification of new technology trends and the development of new business areas and business models, particularly around disruptive technologies. Desi Ukasevich is the Global Director of Ford's Global Automotive Safety Engineering Office and is responsible for all of the company's current and future program safety strategies. That includes autonomous vehicles, corporate rulemaking, advanced strategy development, field service actions, and safety compliance. She has 2 decades of experience with Ford, previously serving as Engineering Director for North American Vehicle Programs and Global Director, Interiors Engineering. She has been recognized as one of the leading women in the auto industry by her peers and various publications. And Mark Riccobono is President of the National Federation of the Blind. Mark was diagnosed with glaucoma and aniridia when he was 5 years old. He went on to attend public schools, graduating with honors before becoming the director of the Wisconsin Center for the Blind and Visually Impaired. He then took a position with the National Federation of the Blind. And while serving as the executive director of the NFB Jernigan Institute, he navigated a car equipped with non-visual technology at the Daytona International Speedway. In 2014, he was first elected NFB president. Okay, when it comes to advanced safety features in vehicles today, help us translate what these features are, what they do, and what they mean to drivers and safety on our roads today. Desi, I'll start with you.
Thank you, John, and thank you for having me here today to share the Ford approach to advanced driver assist technology. This is such an important topic for us as thought leaders in the industry. Ford has always placed safety at the center of our product development process, and I'm honored here to share this approach with you. And we're really at a point of inflection. As most of us on this panel know, an experienced driver can navigate difficult environmental conditions and complex traffic scenarios. However, on occasion, the driver may become drowsy, distracted, or use poor judgment, which can result in a crash. Our technologies aid the drivers in conditions to make their experience more enjoyable, but ultimately safer. And you're going to hear me repeat myself by design around aids. The traditional passive safety elements that many of us grew up with, like restraints and airbags, help protect occupants by mitigating the effects of a crash. However, today, the topic around advanced driver assist systems, or ADAS, use a combination of sensors like radar, sonar, and cameras to sense and interpret this environment, helping customers around the world drive confidently, alerting them of potential collisions, protecting pedestrians and cyclists, and making these routine driving tasks easier and ultimately safer. At Ford, we take a very holistic approach at improving safety by standardizing many of these ADAS features under what we call either the Ford or the Lincoln Copilot 360. Here in the US, Ford and Lincoln Copilot 360 base package offers a suite of 5 standard technologies, which are real fundamental to aiding the driver in a much safer environment. We offer rear view cameras, blind spot, lane keep systems, auto high beam headlamps, and autonomous emergency braking that you mentioned with pedestrian protection. This package is available on at least 15 of our products in 2020, and we're going to proliferate them across our fleet of products. And it really changes the game in terms of driving experience, because the driver now has aids. By deploying these systems across the board on our products as driving aids for our customers, we enable this richer and safer experience. For us, technology with a purpose, and in the case that we're discussing today, making our roads safer, is really a key tenet of how we've forecasted our product strategy.
Yeah, that's really interesting, this idea of the vehicle as a co-pilot or as an aid. Robert, Desi mentioned some of the technology building blocks as well as some of the elements that go into this. And so as a technologist and as at a company that's a leading developer of these technologies, give us your perspective. What goes into this, and what should consumers' expectations be about this?
Fiction, absolutely. When we're talking about active safety system and what we currently see being more and more deployed in the vehicle, I think it's important to note that when we're talking about active safety in the vehicle, you really need to talk about 3 different aspects. The one is the in-cabin monitoring. So you need to fully understand what's going in the car on with the driver, with the passengers, who's in the car, what are we doing, what mood we're in, what is the cognitive load, to really get context of the people driving in the vehicle. At the same time, you also need the second pillar. You need to sense the surrounding. You need to know what's going on around the vehicle, like rebuilding the visual system or human perception system. But you also need to take into account a third pillar that will be becoming more and more important in the near future, that is V2X, adding kind of the 7th sense, allowing you to see around corners and know what's going on outside of your visual field. And I think if we bring these 3 aspects together and put the consumer front and center in terms of what he needs and how does he want to experience this new safety opportunity leading us to a Vision Zero in the next decades is highly important. And for that, Harman is investing in the different sensor types, algorithms for perception, enabling such a technology. And basically, when we talk about putting the customer front and center, augmented reality will play a significant role in terms of how you inform and warn the driver. How do you present to him the information from these driver assist systems in a way that he understands how the system works, what does it see, what is it planning to do, and how can it also interact in a, let's say, immersive way with the driver and the passenger.
Yeah.
In addition to that, you definitely need a lot of sensors like cameras, radars, ultrasonic, as we heard, and need to basically fuse all that information together in central compute environments, domain controllers, and similar technical solutions.
So a lot goes into this. And I want to continue with this idea of keeping the consumer central, or the human being central to this discussion for a minute, and bring Mark Riccobono into this. And Mark, it seems like a lot of the work you've been doing has been about how we think about the consumer with regard to advanced safety technologies. So give us your perspective about how these are and should be and can be consumer centric, these technologies.
Yeah, thank you, John. I appreciate the opportunity to be here. And of course, in my role representing blind Americans, the consumer in the vehicle industry is kind of interesting, because blind people as a class have uniformly not been part of the industry in terms of being considered a consumer, although many blind people have owned cars and gotten other people to drive them. So just a little bit on, consumer involvement. Although blind people, we have not been in the driving class. We've all been in the passenger class of customers. And of course, all of us collectively are part of an important constituency as it relates to vehicles, which is pedestrians. And we've been pleased now for well over a decade working on pedestrian safety, along with the Innovators, culminating in the Pedestrian Safety Enhancement Act and the regulations, which are now in full effect. So as blind people, we have a real vested interest in these technologies as pedestrians, as passengers in traditional vehicles, and as occupants, riders, whatever we're going to call them in the future of vehicles. And obviously for all of us, safety is front and center. And it is our belief from our work that we've done with the auto innovators and in other areas, that having blind people involved from the beginning in the development of technology and our unique perspective as pedestrians, as blind people, adds value to the design process. And in fact, what we know from our experience is that, especially as it relates to interfaces, that when our ideas are incorporated, those interfaces are better for everybody. So we believe that an important aspect of safety is making sure that all consumers are included in the design process. And that's why we're pleased to be part of this conversation.
Yeah, that's really, the idea of thinking about how we can provide mobility and safety and design that in is a great concept. And I think we need to explore that a little bit more as we talk more from a customer point of view. I want to stick with technology a bit before we come back to the customer, though. And I was really sort of taken with, Robert, your framing of the sets of awareness, for lack of a better term. The idea that these technologies are creating awareness, sort of outside the vehicle. But you also referenced awareness and the need to have awareness about what the driver's doing inside the vehicle. Why is that? Why do we have to worry about the driver? These technologies seem to be helping the driver drive. That seems to be pretty good. why do we have to worry about what the driver's up to?
That's a really good question, and it sounds so straightforward. We integrate some technology, a driver assist system, and we've basically proven that it works. But have we thought really about what the driver wants to see, how he usually behaves, and when he really needs this helping hand by a driver assist system to reduce the probability of an accident? I think that's something where we need to put more effort into really putting the operation of a driver assist system into context. So if we know via driver monitoring systems that a driver is distracted, that his cognitive load is high, that he is stressed, we can better utilize the driver assist systems because we know the current situation the driver's in, and we know if he needs support or if he does not need support. So sometimes what we've experienced in field studies is that the technology works, but still the consumer is dissatisfied because it does not operate the way he would like it operate. It's not personalized. It does not really understand how he's driving, how he's accelerating. If you talk about an automatic cruise control, if you talk about automatic emergency braking, there are certain patterns that you can bring into this equation if you better understand your consumer and the individual behind the driving wheel. And
yes, so really, I'm sorry, go ahead, please.
And this is really a key focus for us on how can we make ADAS systems more personalized, and in that way also drive the adoption, the satisfaction, the trust into the technology.
So the technology is effectively learning the driver. But I think implicit in your comment, and I want to bring Desi into this, we're really talking about driver assist systems, aren't we? So in other words, we're not to, a future that Mark referenced a few minutes ago of a fully driverless vehicle, right? We're still talking about vehicles where the driver is still central to the driving task and needs to be attentive and engaged, right? So Desi, is that another aspect of these ideas around driver state monitoring, is to make sure that the interface between the human and the machine are tight? Is that part of this as well?
Yeah, I think that's such an important topic as we think about, how do we integrate the two? And I think what Robert just said about how do we really look at driver state monitoring to do several things. One, to make him or her aware of what is going on with the driver environment. What we don't want to do is to mislead the driver to believe that all of a sudden they are no longer in control. Everything that we continue to reinforce, and it's important as thought leaders that we reinforce, is they are still in command of the vehicle. These assists or these tools are to help mitigate some of the issues that might happen and to help them have a better driving experience. But at the end of the day, we want to use these assist technologies to make them safer and use a human-machine interface that Robert mentioned to kind of, I'll say, nudge them. It's important they stay engaged, and through the benefit of technology, we can help guide them. If you take lane centering, if all of a sudden their hands are off the wheel, we'll nudge them to remain in control. But ultimately, when you use driver state monitoring camera-based systems, you can also monitor eye positioning, and you can really understand, are they in control and watching the road in front of them versus being distracted? Because we know that studies say that the single biggest issue in many accidents is driver error. And our goal is to help eliminate that by providing these aids.
Yeah, I've seen references as high as over 90% of crashes are the result of human error or judgment. So I do, these driver assist systems are critically important, but it does raise the question of consumer acceptance, right? And consumer understanding of these technologies. So let's go back to the the consumer a little bit, and let's talk about this idea. So, what we're doing is we're building on the work that innovators have done with regard to crash worthiness, in other words, surviving crashes, and now we're working to avoid them. And so what I want to understand a little bit further is, what does consumer acceptance, how does that figure into this? So in other words, does it matter, if consumers aren't really aware of what their vehicles do, or aren't comfortable with what their vehicles do? We've got, we're selling, maybe, somewhere last year, 14 million units, this year, maybe higher, 17 million units. There are 280 million cars and trucks on the road today. How do we think about consumer acceptance when it comes to safety technologies? And, Mark, I'm going to start with you because, again, you think about the consumer broadly, and how should we think about consumer acceptance?
Well, I appreciate it. You mentioned the stat earlier, 98%. And we say in the National Federation of the Blind, 100% of accidents today are caused by sighted drivers, which is brings up the point about technology and why we need more consumers involved in it. There's obviously a lot of technology in vehicles today, and the average consumer, unless you're someone that really follows this stuff, just is not aware of how much technology is in the vehicle. So from our perspective as blind people, we think it's really important that to engage consumers in those conversations. Even though blind people as a class, we've not been part of the driving class, and it's not just us, right? There's something like, I think the United States Highway Administration says that, 15.9% of Americans don't have licenses, so that equates to something like 43 million individuals. So of that, blind people is probably only 7 million. So there's a lot of people out there not driving. And if they're not driving, they're probably even less aware of the technology that's in vehicles today. So it's really important that we create opportunities for people to know about the technologies and experience the technologies, and even have an awareness of the technologies that make them safer today and may have even saved their life in an incident. That's where the work that's being done across the country to make it possible for people to experience rides in driverless vehicles is really important, because it's one thing to think theoretically about it, but when you get in one of these vehicles and you experience it, you begin to recognize that it is safe and it is a powerful experience. So I think that's one of the biggest challenges we have, is getting consumers to understand and believe in the technology and believe in the difference it can make in terms of saving lives.
Yeah. So Desi, how do we do that? How do we make consumers more aware of what their vehicles do, and maybe to some degree in this period that we're launching these new technologies, also what they're not doing for drivers? How do we do that? How do we build consumer awareness?
This is such an important topic for all of us to conquer. And I love what Mark said, but I'll add to it. It's consumer acceptance of technology, but also consumer trust of technology. Yeah, we need to really ensure they understand proper and consistent use of features and an understanding of what their role continues to be in the driving task. The features we talked about today are aids, and we consistently use that word to help drivers improve their driving performance, help mitigate risk of crash, and help provide a less stressful driving experience overall. But the key to this consumer acceptance is trust of the technology. The consumer needs to know the benefits as well as the limitations to build this trust. Driver assist technologies are just as we all described. They help drivers, but they don't deliver the driving task. The driver needs to be engaged, and it's our responsibility in the industry to continue to educate, right from the basic driving fundamentals. At Ford, we have a program called Driving Skills for Life, and we teach young drivers many of those fundamentals, but we also have augmented that training to talk about driver assist technologies and what, frankly, they do and what they don't do. So we build clear expectations. And as we said earlier, the NHTSA studies clearly show that driver error is a significant contributor in a large proportion of crashes. But also recently, IIHS conducted a study and found that frontal crash prevention systems with both forward collision warning and autonomous emergency braking cut rear end crashes by half. Those are really powerful statistics. And if we think about what Mark said earlier in terms of how do we enable accessibility to transportation to others, I also believe that, taking these needs in design philosophies and designing of technologies and features will benefit every driver. I'm happy to report that at Ford, we've really taken implementing a lot of these features across our fleet. For example, as part of the memorandum of understanding for applying the autonomous emergency braking, we're at over 90% fitment across our fleet, and we intend to complete the fulfillment well ahead of what's required. And I think these types of technologies then really pair nicely with pedestrian protection. That's also key, ultimately delivering a safer experience for everyone. And then as you take that conversation to the next step is how does that bridge to autonomous vehicles? Again, that framework for trust and understanding what technologies will deliver, I think will enable people to better understand how an autonomous vehicle delivers on that safety expectation, and it will be a natural transition. The driver assist technologies of what we call level 2 today, to me, are a natural bridge. And as we see much more deployment across the board, I do believe that it will become a much more natural transition. And we as an industry need to be responsible in how we talk about these technologies. We need to continue to be mindful of assist technologies and remind drivers that ultimately they need to command the driving experience or the driving task and use these to help make them even better drivers.
Yeah, so that's what's happening right now, right? So we have assist systems making the driving test safer right now. What I hear you saying, Desi, is we're building trust. By building trust in those systems, we're building trust in life-saving technologies today, but also I think you used the term a bridge to highly automated vehicles. And so, Robert, let me bring you back in here. Again, thinking about the technologies. So should we understand some of the technological underpinnings of these driver assist systems in vehicles today are also the technological building blocks to highly automated vehicles? Is that an accurate way to look at these technologies?
Definitely. It's basically the first steps towards automated driving and totally automated driving. That's why it's also so important that these driver assist systems, so talking about systems up to SAE level 2, get the customer acceptance, that customers and consumers see that there's an evidence that they help increase safety, and that there's also for each and any of these features a comfort aspect, because it's always hard to convince consumers to pay money for something that increases an aspect that is seen for them far away, only safety. There needs to be a comfort aspect. And that's why what we also heard from Desi now, these features, automated cruise control and so forth, lane keep assist, are so important because they basically bring together the safety aspect with the comfort aspect. And if consumers see this value, we see that there is an increased comfort. It's easier and more comfortable to get from A to B, but I also have the side effect that it's even more safe. I think that's an important puzzle piece on this journey to getting consumers really bought into the concept of highly automated driving and to raise this trust into the underlying technology.
Yeah. So, Mark, I referenced a drive you took at Daytona. Tell me a little bit more about that. it seems to me that's the ultimate definition of trust, right? So we need to have these building blocks and develop trust, but what's the benefit to, ultimately in that case? So you're a blind person effectively in a vehicle in Daytona. What was that like?
Well, yeah, what I would say is what it was like. I mean, transformative in terms of how we think about um, the capabilities that we can empower through technology. So, as a blind person, I've always known since probably before I was 16, I'm not going to be in the driving class, right? And so, by the time I got to working on the National Federation of the Blind's Blind Driver Challenge, I had long ago settled for the idea that I would never drive. And, I like to say if you start with the prospect that little is possible, it's impossible to get more than little accomplished. And we started talking about, can we build non-visual interfaces to allow a blind person to maneuver a car independently? And of course, our goal in the long run is not to empower blind people around the world to be drivers, because we're all angling toward autonomous vehicles, right? Fully autonomous vehicles. But it's to demonstrate that um, when we stretch to something that most people think is impossible, we empower capabilities that we didn't even realize. And definitely in that process of building technologies with Virginia Tech and putting a car on the track at Daytona, and for myself, utilizing the technologies to drive that car independently, it also took an element of not just um, believing in the technology, but believing in myself, really believing in people, right? Because technology is built by people. And I think part of it is that innate belief that as a society, we're smart enough, powerful enough, um, ethical enough to build technologies that are going to keep people safe and to do it the right way, which is why this discussion is so important. So for me, what it really empowered was, when I got out of the car at Daytona after driving 1.5 miles, you can find it on YouTube, Blind Driver Challenge. What for me it really empowered is I don't know where the limits are anymore for blind people, and as it relates to this discussion, I don't know where the limits are in terms of what we can do with vehicle technology. And of course, we the limit we want to hit, right, is zero in terms of fatalities on the roads of America. And that experience has taught me we can do that. And the trust really is about bringing together people to get that technology together.
Yeah, so many powerful comments there. I really like the idea about, we can do it and do it right. But I think it would be, we should also explore what that means to do it right for a few minutes. And, that seems to me to raise a question about consumer confusion and maybe even, potential misuse of these technologies, especially in the period we're in now. Right. Whereas Desi said, these are the technologies on the roadway today are driver assist technologies. We haven't reached the self-driving period yet that Mark just outlined with regard to commercial vehicles on the roads today. But we're getting there. So, but what about consumer confusion? Do we have some risk of consumer confusion? Are we seeing that a little bit in the marketplace with consumers? Maybe there's the other side of the coin. There's consumers that aren't so trusting of the technology, and maybe there are consumers that might trust it too much or take advantage of what it does and not understand what its limitations are. Is that a challenge for the industry, and what should we do about that if it is? Desi?
I think that's probably the most complicated road we need to navigate through right now. And I'll go back to, how does HMI play into, what role does HMI play into making an ADAS system more intuitive so that we can address those those misunderstandings, potential misunderstandings, and frankly, which can lead to misuse, which ultimately then leads to mistrust. This is especially true in level 2 vehicles, and it's our belief that we need to get this right. We need to help customers understand, again, consistently, what's their role as the driver. So if I think about our level 2 system in which both lane centering and adaptive cruise control are simultaneously engaged, these features can obviously help save lives by assisting drivers and reducing the potential for human error that can ultimately result in a crash. However, and I underline however, they are not designed to operate independently of a human driver. And unfortunately, we've seen misuse, and we've seen a lot of this kind of, in today's modern day social media, have seen a lot of that shared in a way that I think continues to promote mistrust and potential abuse of a technology. The Ford team has participated in discussions, John, with Auto Innovators, as you know, and I'd like to congratulate you for taking time to really put a framework to help develop some safety principles to proactively address driver monitoring systems for level 2. And for us, this is the key to starting that journey to ultimately autonomous vehicles. The principles are broken down into several key areas, including consumer information, driver monitoring, a standard feature for level 2 systems, driver warnings and escalation, and it talks about and principles around misuse and abuse, and then camera-based systems. The reason I wanted to kind of use those to explain our system, it's more as an opportunity for us to all understand how these systems work. For example, in Ford's Blue Cruise, which will be available later this year, as a level 2 driver assist feature for hands-free driving on certain pre-mapped roads that have divided highways. But again, if you misuse the system, the system through HMI will prompt you to re-engage. And our philosophy using the camera-based driver monitoring system will engage the driver and will increasingly alarm the driver to re-engage. And ultimately, if they don't re-engage, it will bring a vehicle to a stop. And obviously, there's a lot that happens in between. But the reason I portray that is as an illustrative example of, as we advance our technologies to allow more assist tools, we need to be able to monitor the state of the driver engagement so that we can help them stay engaged. And again, as I continue to say, ultimately, they are the driver who is leading the driving task, and they need to be responsible, and we need to help them stay safe.
Yeah. So Robert, when we think about this, the technology promise, the benefits, how we can use technology to keep the driver engaged, what other tools are there to build consumer trust and consumer awareness and address confusion? I think, for example, about the new car assessment program, obviously, developed in the United States quite some time ago. There's Euro NCAP and other programs like it around the world. Is that a tool that can help build consumer awareness and also support the development and commercialization of these technologies?
It's definitely one of the essential building blocks because it drives standardization. It drives a really common use of terms across different geographies, so everyone is talking the same language. That's where it definitely helps a lot to get this common understanding in place and to not confuse consumers with talking about operational design domains or expecting from a consumer that he reads 6, 7, 8 pages in a manual to understand what the system is able to do. However, that's really from our Harman perspective, just one of the essential building blocks to minimize or really get rid of this confusion we currently see globally in the market when it comes to driver assist systems. One other critical element, and that really comes back to Desi's comment on a co-pilot, is to have this co-pilot, the driver assist systems, also act like a coach. And in that context, multimodal MMI is becoming, so really audio, visual, haptical feedback becoming more and more important, to have a way to really portray to the consumer what is the system doing. So don't talk about the operational design domain, but find ways, as mentioned, via augmented reality displays, via a directed audio feedback, via haptic feedback, that a consumer, the driver, really sees, okay, I'm now getting to the limit of the system. I need to re-engage, else the car will get to a safe stop. So you need to have the system coach the driver so that after a certain period of time, he really understands what the system is capable to do without looking into a manual, reading through several pages. So it's this training of the driver in a really non-obtrusive way, by just leveraging what you do every day, using audio, using visual feedback, using also haptic feedback.
Yeah. Desi, does the NCAP program in the United States, do you think it's up to that task right now, or do changes need to be made in order to realize the benefits that we're talking about here with ADAS technologies?
I think that just like today's topic about modernizing our approach, I'm real excited and hopeful that these next updates, that NHTSA will take it as an opportunity to modernize some of the requirements to really better take advantage of the advanced vehicle safety technologies. And frankly, to provide credit to automakers that are prioritizing this safety content deployment. Ford advocates adding crash avoidance technology to NCAP, and I know that NCAP is doing a lot of testing and research around this, and I'm hopeful that prioritizing technologies that have demonstrated real-world safety benefits is going to be a shift in where NCAP goes. The other opportunity really is around harmonization. If we look at regulatory requirements, NCAP, and as you articulated a few minutes ago, the global aspect that automakers have to realize, and as we can imagine, the implications to complexity of all of that, it makes it hard to have broad scale deployment. But I think that's recognized through the global NCAP efforts. And I think that in this next round, that I'm hopeful we're going to start to see a move from a traditional testing approach. In the current NCAP protocol, most of us know things like pedestrian protection are measured in very mechanical sense. If you hit the pedestrian, where is the impact relative to the hood or bonnet? In the next world, I really never want to hit that pedestrian. I want to be able to get the credit of having, autonomous emergency braking. And that's where I would love to see NCAP go in the context of modernization.
Yeah. So Mark, I would imagine that makes sense, right? From a consumer perspective, and from, again, to your point earlier about we need to be thinking about safety, both for people inside the vehicle as well as people out, right? To have crash avoidance technologies rated as part of NCAP. Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the part of the work that our organization has done with yours, right, in the past is really also been focused on the consumers, and in this case, the pedestrians. In our previous work, to make sure that the pedestrians can make smart decisions based on hearing vehicles, but why not have the vehicles make smart decisions based on perceiving the pedestrians? I mean, it should work both ways. And I think that, working together, that's how we can get these innovations to really make a difference in the world.
Yeah, I think that's really that's great, and I love the work we did together on the so-called quiet cars rule. For people who aren't really focused on that, we have a situation where an electric vehicle makes no noise. There's no combustion, so there's no engine noise. And so it raised a question that we needed to work with Mark and his organization and others, which was, how do we create noise so that we can provide a warning and a signal to consumers, and so, to pedestrians. And so yeah. I do think that is sort of a foundational exercise that now can be expanded, as you point out, with regard to crash avoidance systems.
And the consumer role was really important there, right? Because it's not just noise, right? I mean, we don't want noise for the sake of noise. We need an appropriate level,
Right.
but not in all settings. You know, if a vehicle's moving at 50 miles an hour, it's generating enough sound as it is. And of course, this is very relevant to blind people. But you know, the crossover was pedestrians, cyclists, people walking around with headphones. And I think that's where when we work together on all of these technologies, they make a societal difference that's smarter in the end.
Yeah, I want to stick with you, Mark. I have just another question I have that's related to the pandemic that I want to pursue briefly. And what during the pandemic we saw companies begin to show how autonomous delivery could be a benefit of delivery of food, for example, or delivery of medication or vaccines. And we continue to see pilots of driverless vehicles moving people to medical appointments, for example, or vaccine appointments, on a pilot program basis. Um, you know, have those actions that have gotten a little bit of attention in the media, are those types of things building awareness and trust in advanced technologies in your view?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, if it's always good to look for the positives, right, in a situation like a worldwide pandemic, and I do think uniquely the pandemic has provided real use cases for this technology, and what a great opportunity to test some of these technologies. Obviously, we need to do more as a society to create to get real world and be used in a limited safe environment so that people can continue to have experiences with them, and the innovators can continue to learn from that real world data. So I think history is going to show that the positive of the pandemic was to present some opportunities to really leverage these technologies in a way that we don't know what the future impact is going to be yet even.
Yeah, interesting. So I want to come to one other sort of theme that I referenced in my opening, and that is the idea of competitiveness. Robert and Desi, you work for companies that are in business to create innovation and create public good and to create value to your shareholders. So how do we think about this idea of competitiveness? Is the development of this technology a competitiveness question for countries around the world? And if it is, does it, are certain companies, certain countries working to advantage their economies with this technology, or is it not really a competitive issue or concern yet? Desi, let me start with you.
I think recognizing the need to evolve mobility and transportation by definition makes it a competitive advantage or a competitive necessity. And I think that, we need to help create an infrastructure, together with legislation that enables that. And I think that if we don't tackle some of the challenges with deployment of the many facets of technologies we talked about today, we'll quickly find ourselves behind. Behind from an impact to society. We talked about the wonderful things that the technologies are able to do to create a richer experience, a safer community, more accessibility to transportation, and obviously a viable business future. I think we need to continue to work together with our communities and with legislation to be able to have a platform to deploy these technologies. The time is ripe. The technologies are available. As industry leaders, we have all demonstrated commitment. At Ford, we're very proud of what we've done, publicly announcing over $7 billion commitment in the AV space. And even in the CV to X, where connectivity is another tenet of deploying these technologies. So I would say this is not just a competitive element from a business, it's a competitive necessity to advance how we partake in mobility in the future. And I'm hopeful conversations like this will continue to push us together to be, part of leading technology that many of us are proud to be Americans for. And so I look forward to continue to contribute in that manner.
Robert, any thoughts on competitiveness?
Yeah, if you look into the tremendous benefit of these new mobility concepts for society, I would say this is really a global phenomenon that everyone is now investing in it. And for sure, there's some type of competition, but there's also competition. And you see that there are ecosystems forming itself, people collaborating, because it's such a complex technology to master that there will always be the need to work together, and that we will see these alliances be forming, be changing, that you see an evolution over the next decade in terms of people working together, people competing, but in the end, leading to a more advanced technology that can enable this vision of a future mobility with highly automated driving. So I think you never get technology innovation done if there's no competition.
Yeah, really interesting. We're really at just about at the end of our time, so I'm going to ask each of you to close with a final thought. And I'm often asked, gee, when are we going to see a zero fatality future? When are we going to see the promise of these technologies fully realized? And it challenges me to think of myself as an optimist or a pessimist, and to think of how I consider the partnerships we have with governments and other important partners in the development of and the achievement of this vision. So I'm going to ask each of you to close with your thoughts about, are you optimistic about a vision zero, or a future vision of zero fatalities, and how important is technology to achieving that vision? And so, Mark, let me start with you.
Well, how optimistic? The optimism comes from the fact that we're at the table really from the beginning, right? We're in this journey from the beginning, and so often in technology or other things, people with disabilities are the last to be considered. And so for me, the optimism comes from the fact that we're part of this conversation from the early stages. That's how we know that we're going to get to a place that is empowering and powerful, not just for us, but for all individuals who will take advantage of this technology. And I'm particularly excited because we don't know also what the spin-off benefits will be from this technology and the places that it will have impact. So we're proud to be with you on this journey, and we're looking forward to wherever we end up together.
Fantastic. Robert, are you an optimist?
I'm always an optimist, yeah. So, but really need to answer in two parts. From my perspective, if we talk about taking out the human error, having the technology available to do that, I'm bullish enough to say, yeah, we can reach that by 2030. But the ground realities, knowing how many vehicles are still in market that are not equipped with that technology, that will lead to adding maybe another decade, if not 2 decades on top of that year, up until we reach zero fatality. But I think we'll make a significant, huge step forward in the next, or in this decade, up until 2030, to get much, much closer to that goal of a vision zero.
Yeah. Desi, last word goes to you.
I love the North Star of zero fatalities. It's so inspirational. And I think it's the right time, right? We're at that point of inflection. Our industry has been disrupted by technologies in a way that I think 10 years ago, none of us could have imagined. But it affords us this tremendous opportunity that all my colleagues highlighted to be part of reshaping mobility and transportation to increase accessibility for everyone and to contribute to a better world. I mean, can't get much more optimistic than that.
Wow, this has been a great conversation. Mark, Robert, Desi, thank you so much for joining us. It's been a real treat to spend an hour with you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, John.
Thank you, John.
Today's discussion has been not only timely, but essential. Policymakers are working to understand how best to encourage both safety and innovation. And it is our responsibility to give them the facts they need to make informed decisions that can advance innovation and safety technologies. Today's session has been just one in a series of Auto Innovators dialogues on a wide range of topics. We thank you for joining us, and we look forward to continuing this discussion and others in our ongoing future-driven series.
Thank you for joining us today. Our next forum, Keeping Cars Safe for Kids, will explore how we address and prevent pediatric heat stroke through public awareness and technology advancements. We'll make sure to keep you posted about additional forums as we continue charting the path to a cleaner, safer, and smarter transportation future.